All right, so today we're diving deep, really deep into the world of Steve Jobs.
Using Walter Isaacson's biography as our guide, of course.
Of course, Isaacson's biography.
A treasure trove of insights.
You know, I think everyone kind of wants to understand what made this guy tick, right?
Right. Go beyond that Apple guy image.
Exactly. Unearth the stories behind his, well, everything. His vision, his ambition, even, let's be honest, his flaws.
And what's fascinating is that Jobs gave Isaacson complete freedom with this book.
Really?
No control over the content, no pre-publication review.
Wow, for someone like Jobs, known for his, shall we say, meticulous control, that's pretty surprising.
It's almost unheard of.
Makes you wonder what his end game was, right? What was he hoping to achieve?
Perhaps some calculated image management. Or maybe, just maybe, he genuinely wanted to be understood, warts and all.
Interesting thought. But let's rewind a bit, set the stage. We're talking about late 20th century America.
A time when America was obsessed with innovation, with staying ahead of the curve.
And Jobs, he steps right into that void, doesn't he? He becomes the embodiment of American ingenuity.
Absolutely. Isaacson really captures that zeitgeist.
Showing how Jobs essentially proved that creativity and technology, when married together, could be unbelievably profitable.
He didn't just stumble into this, though. This was a deliberate, cultivated culture at Apple.
This fusion of imagination and engineering, right?
Precisely.
It wasn't just lip service, it was baked into the very DNA of Apple.
Take, for instance, Jobs' almost fanatical obsession with design. And not just the surface stuff. He obsessed over every detail.
Even the parts no one would ever see, right?
Exactly. Remember that anecdote about the carpenter who uses beautiful wood even for the back of a cabinet?
Oh yeah, a perfect analogy for Jobs' philosophy.
He believed that aesthetic quality, that attention to detail, had to permeate every single aspect of a product.
It's like he saw it as a moral imperative, a way of honoring the craft.
The kind of reverence for the process.
It makes you wonder, though, where did this almost spiritual belief in quality come from?
Well, to truly understand that, we need to go back to his roots, his childhood.
His adoption, his early awareness of being different, even, as Isaacson puts it, smarter than his parents. All of that must have had a profound impact.
It shaped his worldview, absolutely.
And his parents, they recognized this, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. They nurtured that intellectual curiosity.
Those weekends spent at junkyards with his dad, Paul, haggling over car parts.
Talk about hands-on learning.
It wasn't just about snagging cheap parts, though, was it? There was a deeper lesson there.
Jobs' father was a master negotiator. He instilled in his son the art of persuasion.
So those junkyard trips were like a crash course in deal-making.
In a way, yes. A skill that, let's face it, served Jobs well later on.
Though perhaps, at times, it became a bit of a double-edged sword.
Perhaps.
But it wasn't all nuts and bolts and haggling, right? There was also this exposure to design, aesthetics.
Growing up in an Eichler home, those clean lines, those open spaces.
It must have instilled in him a deep appreciation for simplicity, for functional design.
Those design principles, inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright, became a hallmark of Apple products, wouldn't you say?
Without a doubt. But it wasn't just the aesthetics of the house itself. Think about the environment.
The neighborhood was filled with engineers. Even the, as Isaacson puts it, ne'er-do-wells were engineers.
It's like he was immersed in this culture of innovation from day one.
It was in the very air he breathed.
So you've got this intellectually gifted kid surrounded by technology with a knack for persuasion, and then boom, he gets exposed to early computers.
At HP, no less, and even NASA. Imagine the impact of seeing something like the HP 9100A for the first time.
It was the dawn of the personal computing era, the early 70s, but Jobs, he immediately grasps the potential.
He was always looking ahead, envisioning how technology could reshape the world.
It's fascinating, though, his interests weren't limited to just technology, were they? He was also drawn to, well, something quite different.
Eastern spirituality, yes.
Even following a friend all the way to India to meet a guru.
This was the era of counterculture, remember? A time when young people were searching for meaning beyond traditional institutions.
And Jobs, with his already strong sense of individuality, he was naturally drawn to this quest for enlightenment.
It fueled his belief in thinking differently, in challenging the status quo.
But this quest, combined with those early experiences of adoption, I think it also fostered a sense of detachment, almost a feeling of being set apart from the world.
Which might explain, at least in part, some of the more challenging aspects of his personality.
Let's be blunt, the guy had a bit of a reputation.
To put it mildly, Jobs was known for being demanding, prickly, often downright rude.
He had zero tolerance for anything less than perfect, and he wasn't shy about letting people know it.
Isaacson recounts how Jobs actually considered adequacy morally appalling.
Wow, that's a pretty extreme way of looking at things.
It is, isn't it?
But that uncompromising attitude, it's fascinating because it's what fueled his success.
Though it also created a lot of friction, especially when it came to control.
He hated the idea of licensing the Macintosh OS, right?
Absolutely. He wanted total control over the user experience.
And that control, it extended to everything.
Remember the story about the NXT computer? The engineers had to design the circuit boards to fit perfectly into a cube.
Just because Jobs was obsessed with the aesthetic of a cube?
It had to be a cube, no compromises.
You have to wonder, though, was it all ego? Or was there something more? Because alongside that controlling nature, he also had this uncanny ability to inspire his teams.
The infamous reality distortion field, right?
He somehow convinced people that the impossible was possible.
Pushing them beyond their limits to achieve his vision.
It's a testament to his charisma, his conviction.
Even if it was often exhausting for those around him.
But here's the thing, he wasn't always right.
Oh, he made his fair share of mistakes.
Isaacson tells the story about how Jobs was furious when Apple engineers secretly developed a better disk drive for the Macintosh.
Going against his direct orders.
But then, and this is key, he swallowed his pride and admitted they were right.
He was capable of recognizing a better solution, even if it meant admitting he was wrong.
But those temper tantrums, they were legendary.
Like a force of nature.
Remember that story about the iMac product demo? He breaks down in tears because it had a CD tray instead of a slot-loading drive.
A complete meltdown.
It's almost childlike, isn't it? This raw, unrestrained emotion.
It reveals a certain vulnerability, an immaturity he never quite outgrew.
But it also speaks to his absolute passion for what he was
It
doing.
wasn't just a job, it was an all-consuming mission.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about some of the key moments that shaped Apple's journey.
It all starts in that Los Altos garage, right?
The birthplace of Apple.
The Apple I and Apple II, creations of Jobs and Wozniak, they were revolutionary.
They sparked the personal computer revolution.
And put Apple on the map.
And then comes the Macintosh, with Jobs' vision of a computer that was both powerful and user-friendly.
He was adamant about a simple, elegant design, something that stood out from the clunky computers of the time.
And his attention to detail, it was, well, obsessive.
Remember the story about Bill Atkinson's circle algorithm? Atkinson was thrilled with his breakthrough, but Jobs immediately wanted to know if it could also draw rounded corners.
Nothing got past him. He knew that every tiny detail contributed to the overall user experience.
And this is years before anyone was really talking about user experience design.
Jobs understood intuitively that it wasn't just about the technology itself, but how people interacted with it.
It had to be seamless, intuitive, almost effortless.
Then, of course, we have the rise of Microsoft, the development of Windows.
A major turning point for Apple and for Jobs personally.
He was incredibly critical of Microsoft.
Famously saying, the only problem with Microsoft is they just have no taste.
It's a revealing quote, isn't it?
It highlights his unwavering belief in the power of design, his disdain for mediocrity.
Do you think that disdain, that drive to be different, was part of what fueled him?
It's a great question. Was it a motivator or a hindrance in the long run?
Something to ponder, for sure.
Because that uncompromising attitude, while it pushed him to achieve great things, it also led to his downfall.
His ouster from Apple in 1985, it was a shock to the industry.
He went on to found NXT, which ironically played a key role in Apple's eventual revival.
But that's a story for another time, I think.
Agreed. We need to delve deeper into those early Apple years to understand the seeds of both his success and his eventual downfall.
Let's take a break here and come back to unravel how those early experiences, both personal and professional, shaped the trajectory of his life and career. Okay, so we've talked about Jobs' brilliance, his demanding nature, his drive.
That need for control, it wasn't confined to the boardroom, was it?
No, it definitely spilled over into his personal life.
His relationships with family, friends, lovers, all complex, all intense.
And perhaps nowhere is that more evident than in his relationship with his biological family, which Isaacson reveals is full of twists and turns.
That's like a novel in itself.
Take his sister Mona Simpson, for example.
Imagine discovering you have a sibling you never knew existed, and that sibling happens to be Steve Jobs.
Talk about a life-changing revelation. It really underscores the power of family secrets, doesn't it?
They did form a close bond, though. later in life.
United by that shared experience of being put up for adoption, as Isaacson puts it.
They understood each other in a way that few others could.
And Jobs became fiercely protective of Mona.
Especially when it came to their biological father, Abdulfattah Jandali.
Right. Jobs held a lot of resentment toward Jandali for abandoning Mona.
Even refusing to meet him.
It's telling, isn't it? This deep anger toward a man who walked away from his responsibilities.
It's a pretty strong stance, especially coming from a man who initially denied paternity of his own daughter, Lisa.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost Shakespearean.
This cycle of abandonment and reconciliation playing out across generations.
Jobs' own behavior towards Lisa mirroring, in some ways, the actions of the father he so vehemently condemned.
It's as if he couldn't escape the patterns of his past.
Try as he might. He did eventually attempt to build a relationship with Lisa.
But it was always fraught with tension.
Strained by those early years of denial and absence.
It makes you wonder how much those early experiences of abandonment, both his own and Mona's, shaped his approach to relationships.
Was he subconsciously replicating those patterns, or was he fighting against them, trying to break free from a cycle he never asked to be a part of?
It's a question that psychologists could probably debate for hours.
And then there's his love life, which, to put it mildly, was pretty intense.
Passionate, tumultuous, full of highs and lows.
His relationship with Tina Redsi, for example, it was something else.
Deeply connected, yet constantly clashing.
Over their values, their ambitions.
A classic story of two strong-willed individuals who just couldn't make it work, despite the love they shared.
And years later, even after his marriage, Jobs still harbored feelings for Tina.
Admitting that she was the first person I was truly in love with.
That's a powerful statement, don't you think?
It speaks to the depth of their connection, the sense that they shared something unique, something irreplaceable.
Which makes his eventual marriage to Lorene Powell all the more intriguing.
They seem like such an odd couple on the surface.
Lorene, grounded, practical.
And Jobs, this whirlwind of intensity and idealism.
Maybe that's what made it work, though.
A calm, opposites attract, as they say.
And their wedding, well, it was definitely unconventional, even by Silicon Valley standards.
A Zen Buddhist monk officiating the ceremony at the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite.
Jobs, of course, micromanaged every detail.
Even insisting the guests arrive by chartered bus.
But even in those moments, you see glimpses of his romantic side.
Their choice of a storybook-style home in Palo Alto, for instance.
You'd think the king of minimalist tech design would opt for something sleek, modern.
But no, he chooses a charming, almost whimsical cottage.
It's almost like he was yearning for a simpler life, a retreat from the constant demands of his world.
Which, of course, brings us to his health challenges.
His battle with pancreatic cancer.
A chapter of his life that's impossible to ignore.
It's a reminder that even the most brilliant, the most powerful, are still vulnerable.
To the fragility of the human body.
And Jobs' response to his diagnosis, it was so characteristic of him.
A mix of defiance, denial, a relentless search for control.
He initially resisted traditional treatments.
Opting instead for alternative therapies.
Herbal remedies, strict diets, anything but conventional medicine. His family, his friends, they pleaded with him to reconsider, to get surgery.
But he was convinced he could beat cancer on his own terms.
It was only after 9 months of exploring these alternative paths that he finally agreed to surgery.
A decision he later regretted, wishing he had done it sooner.
It's a heartbreaking reminder that time is precious.
And that even the most brilliant minds can't cheat death.
His struggle with cancer, it was incredibly difficult to witness.
The weight loss, the pain, the emotional toll it took on everyone around him.
But even in the face of his own mortality, he continued to work, to innovate, to drive Apple forward.
It's remarkable, really.
Yeah. Overseeing the development of the iPhone, the iPad, iCloud, all during his final years.
Where did he find that strength, that resilience?
His complicated relationship with food, his youthful experimentation with fasting, I think it all played a role in his response to his illness.
Even when doctors urged him to eat protein-rich foods, he could barely stomach them.
It was almost as if he was trying to exert control over his body, his fate, through sheer willpower.
Like if he could deny his body's needs, he could somehow outmaneuver death itself.
I remember that story about his housekeeper making him a homemade pumpkin pie.
The only thing he said he could eat.
He took one bite and pushed it away.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
This man, known for his relentless pursuit of perfection, reduced to a single bite of pumpkin pie.
A stark reminder of the limits of human control, even for someone like Steve Jobs.
But even in those final months, there were moments of grace, of reconciliation.
That final conversation with Bill Gates, for instance.
His longtime rival.
They acknowledged each other's strengths, found common ground.
It speaks to the power of human connection, even in the face of mortality.
And it underscores the complexity of Jobs' character.
Capable of great pettiness and extraordinary generosity, often in the same breath.
He was a paradox, a study in contrasts.
So, we've explored Jobs' personal life, his vulnerabilities, his flaws.
But ultimately, it's his impact on the world, his legacy as an innovator, that defines him, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Shall we delve into that now?
Let's take a moment to gather our thoughts, and then come back to explore how Steve Jobs' vision shaped not just the world of technology, but our culture as a whole.
Welcome back. We've spent a lot of time really digging into who Steve Jobs was.
The man behind the myth, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. But let's talk about his impact on the world. What is Steve Jobs' true legacy?
It's impossible to overstate his influence, on technology, on design.
He didn't just make computers, he made them, objects of desire.
Yeah, that Think Different campaign.
It wasn't just some clever marketing slogan.
It was a cultural phenomenon.
It really was. Jobs, I think he tapped into this deep yearning for individuality.
Innovation.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just empty rhetoric.
He lived it.
He absolutely did. Never content with the status quo, always pushing those boundaries.
Challenging conventions.
Making technology more human.
Yeah, but was it all substance? Some critics say Jobs was,
more showman than tech visionary.
Right, more style than substance.
Sure, he had a flair for the dramatic, no doubt.
Those product launches, legendary.
But I think to dismiss him as just a showman, it really underestimates his deep understanding of what people wanted.
Sometimes even before they knew it themselves.
Exactly. Like, think about the iPod.
Okay, yeah, it wasn't the first MP3 player out there.
But it was the one that made digital music mainstream.
So was it just good timing?
Or did Jobs create that market?
Through sheer force of will.
I think it was a combination. The technology was there, but Jobs, he knew how to package it.
Make it, sexy.
That sleek design, the integration with iTunes, it was brilliant.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have the iPhone.
Which quite literally changed the world.
Changed everything.
Remember what it was like before the iPhone.
Tethered to desktops, fumbling with clunky interfaces.
Jobs saw the potential of mobile, not just shrinking the computer, but changing how we interact with information.
With each other.
Exactly. He saw the future.
And the music industry, he dragged them kicking and screaming into the digital age with the iTunes store.
Some might say he bullied them.
Yeah, he could be ruthless in negotiations.
But he understood that the future of music was digital.
He saw that before a lot of people.
He wasn't afraid to force the issue, to shake things up.
And disruption, that's a recurring theme with Jobs, isn't it?
Yeah, music, mobile phones, even the personal computer industry itself.
He wasn't afraid to break the mold.
And that's a big part of his legacy, this idea that innovation isn't just about incremental improvements.
It's about,
bold, audacious leaps forward.
Challenging assumptions.
And ultimately creating something truly new.
And he certainly knew how to stand out.
The black turtlenecks, the jeans, the whole minimalist aesthetic.
Yeah, this carefully crafted image.
Was it genuine? Was it all part of the Steve Jobs show?
I don't know, maybe a bit of both.
But it was brilliant branding.
An instantly recognizable persona.
But his story, it's also a cautionary tale, right?
The demanding boss, the temper tantrums, even cruelty at times.
That relentless drive for perfection.
He came at a cost.
He could be incredibly difficult to work with, no doubt about that.
His obsession with control, his unwillingness to compromise.
It alienated a lot of people.
So, was Steve Jobs a visionary genius?
Or a ruthless tyrant?
The answer's probably...
a bit of both.
Yeah, he was complex.
He was a flawed human being.
Capable of great things.
And terrible things.
But that complexity, that's what makes him so fascinating, right?
He wasn't a saint, he wasn't a monster, he was just a man.
Driven by this almost insatiable desire to make a mark on the world.
And he certainly did that.
But his story, it challenges us.
To think about the trade-offs we're willing to make.
To achieve our goals.
Is it okay to be ruthless in the name of innovation?
How do we balance ambition with compassion?
Tough questions.
Questions we're still grappling with today.
And that's the thing about Jobs' legacy. It's not just about the products.
It's about a way of thinking.
A willingness to challenge the status quo.
To think differently.
He raised the bar for everyone.
So as we wrap up our deep dive here, I'm left wondering, what can we learn from Steve Jobs?
From both his triumphs and his failures.
How can we channel that drive, that passion, while also remembering to be kind?
To be human.
To build a world that's not just technologically advanced, but also more just, more compassionate.
That's the real challenge, I think.
And the real legacy of Steve Jobs.
I think you've nailed it.
Yeah.
It's not about copying him, but about taking inspiration from his audacity, his vision.
And using that to build a better future.
For all of us.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Steve Jobs.
We hope this has given you a deeper understanding of this complex and influential figure.
And perhaps even sparked some new ideas of your own.
Until next time.
Keep thinking differently.